Ah, yes, I can feel it in the air and in the empty buildings and shopping malls. Halloween is upon us, time for spooks, scares, and other adjectives that got turned into nouns. Now, personally, for me, I've never really gotten down with this holiday like everyone else has. I mean, I obviously don't do the whole trick-or-treat thing anymore. I don't have little enough respect for my time on this earth to stand outside freaking out kids. I don't care about candy for the most part, and I especially don't like going inside department stores and being attacked by 1,000 animatronics. Despite all this, though, there has been one constant that I have enjoyed with Halloween ever since before I picked up my first horror game. Yeah, I love picking up some creepy games to play and have a blast with, but one of my favorites is a game that I've consistently played on Halloween every year for at least half a decade now, and it isn't even a scary game. My favorite game to play for this holiday is Luigi's Mansion. Now, Luigi's Mansion has been a game I've come back to many times, even excluding the ritualistic playthroughs of this game I've been doing every year since 2016 or so. I've still gone through this game in its entirety a pretty big number of times, and it probably holds the record for one of my most completed games ever. But why though? What made this game strike a chord with me to a degree that none of the other Luigi's Mansion games have? Well, that's what I want to figure out. Going through the game with as sharp of an eye as possible to understand what gravitates me to this game so much. Oh, and before anyone says anything, no, I won't be looking at the 2018 3DS remake since I want to keep things focused on the original for the time being, and I probably have enough to say about that game to fill its own video. So, without further ado, grab your candy and get comfortable as we take a look at Luigi's Mansion. So, as soon as we start the game, we get an invitation from the devil. And I said this game isn't scary. Then we get to our opening cutscene. We got Luigi, a mansion, everything checks out so far. Apparently the story goes that Luigi won a mansion in a contest he didn't even enter. Since he's an innocent soul and doesn't see this to be at best a scam attempt, and at worst a planned homicide, Luigi gladly accepts his new mansion. Since he thinks he's better than everyone else, Mario decides to show up at Luigi's mansion before Luigi even gets the chance. And let's just say he gets his comeuppance. Luigi arrives at the mansion a little while later, scoping out the area to figure out where Mario is before getting attacked by a ghost, and these guys mean business. They aren't here to scare you to death, they'll just deck you in the face, and Luigi is rightfully horrified. Before he can get his lights knocked out, though, help arrives in the form of Professor Egad, who sucks up the ghost with his vacuum and then runs back to his laboratory with Luigi. While in his lab, Egad explains that the mansion randomly showed up not too long ago, and most importantly, he saw Mario go inside and never came back, so now you gotta take Egad's vacuum, called the Poltergust 3000, and use it to suck up ghosts that get in your way and find Mario. And while you're at it, Egad also tasks you with bringing the ghosts you capture back, since they used to be trapped in paintings for this gallery he had for some reason. Eventually, we find out just what happened to Mario. See, this mansion was originally created by King Boo, and he also trapped Mario inside a painting just like Egad once did to him. And after Luigi presses this button, he frees all the Boos, including the king himself. Now, all I want to know is if King Boo created this mansion, then why are he and all his Boo friends stuffed under the floorboards like a dead body in the Telltale Heart? Although, since the Boos are such spiteful little shits, I wouldn't be surprised if they hid under there just to scare the piss out of Luigi. So yeah, that's our story, at least for now anyway. So let's move on to gameplay. I mean, if we want to get to Mario, we need to deal with the ghosts in our way, so how does this work? Well, Luigi is always holding his flashlight at the ready, unless the room is lit, in which case there's no need for it. When you shine a light at the ghost, it'll have a heart attack so bad that it'll become visible. This is your chance to strike and start sucking up with your vacuum, constantly pulling away from the ghosts to make sure they don't leave your grasp until you're done with them. Now, when I first played this game, I thought it was a bit annoying. Sometimes my flashlight would stun a ghost too early or when I was too far away. Nowadays, I don't have much trouble with this, but if you do, it'll be good to know that you can turn off your flashlight by holding the B button, so you'll be able to leave it off until just the right time, and then you can turn it on when you're right next to the ghost and be at a much bigger advantage. I always liked how sucking up ghosts felt in this game. You can feel the struggle each time you slam back on the stick to make sure the ghost doesn't get away, and each time you slam the stick, you take off more and more chunks of health until you get that short reprieve when you finally suck up the ghost. I remember Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon changed it to where now you just hold the general direction away from the ghost and that'll do much of the work for you, with you sometimes needing to tap away from them to make sure the ghosts are still wrangled in. And while that system works better for the 3DS's circle pad, I like the original system much more. It felt a lot more satisfying in how you go about capturing the ghosts. This game also excels in ghost types, which is an area I feel later games would start having problems with. There's the standard orange ghost, the pink ghosts that have a little more health but are still pretty easy, the big blue guys that hit really hard and have a lot more health, the hanging ghosts that catch you off guard and sometimes throw bombs at you, the bowling ghosts that throw their bowling balls at you, and the garbage can ghosts can chuck banana peels everywhere that you need to make sure not to slip on. My favorites, though, are the Shy Guy and Grabber ghosts. The Shy Guy ghosts, you need to rip their masks off with your vacuum to be able to get a chance to shine your light on them. And I think to this day, this is the only maskless Shy Guy we've ever seen in a Mario game. The Grabber ghosts are also cool, though, since you need to make sure they don't get on you while you're dealing with other ghosts, or else they'll stun you for a bit. And in some really cool segments, they'll be invisible and you'll need to use parts of the room to figure out where they are, or if you're cool like I am, you could always figure out where they are by using the dust of them appearing as a clue. The ghosts sometimes also have elements attached to them. As you go through the game, you'll eventually find these elemental metals, fire, ice, and water. You'll then be able to use them after sucking up these little elemental ghost things, and you can then shoot the element out of your poltergust. It can be used for puzzle solving and optional things, but it's also used to defeat certain ghosts. If a ghost has an element attached to them, you'll need to beat them with the element that opposes it. Water beats fire, fire beats ice, and ice beats water. What's cool about them, though, is that you can also do damage with them to non-elemental ghosts, so the elements are good for helping yourself out of a crowded ghost situation. Another really prevalent ghost in this game is boos. After releasing the boos, there'll be one in almost every room of the mansion. Once you clear a room, your radar will start beeping, and you'll need to follow how hard the radar is beeping to check the furniture the boo is hiding in. Once you find the boo, you need to capture it, and here's why I really don't like boos in this game. 1. Boos are able to run away from the current room. 2. Boos can run into rooms you haven't opened yet, meaning you're either shit out of luck, or you need to reload your save so that they'll go back to the room they're assigned to. 3. You don't lock boos into your pool like with other ghosts. Instead, having them in the vacuum does damage, but they're still capable of moving around. And 4. By later rooms of the mansion, boos have insane amounts of health, so it's inevitable that they'll get away and waste your time. To top it off, though, you need certain amounts of boos to proceed. Thankfully, you don't need all of them to beat the game, but you still need 80% of them, so you're not going to be getting off scot-free. What makes this even more frustrating is something that I want to call a glitch, but since it's still in the 3DS remake, I don't even know. When boos escape into the hallway, they take nearly no damage at all, which makes things even more frustrating than it already is. If you want to make catching boos a lot easier if you're going for all of them, I'd recommend grabbing the bare minimum boos you need to progress, and then going back once you've opened up all the rooms to catch the ones you haven't yet. You'll still do a lot of running between rooms, but you'll never get stuck. I also thankfully found out a good strategy for catching boos. If you move around a lot while still keeping your vacuum on them, they seem to have a harder time escaping, which makes things a lot more tolerable. Another good thing to keep in mind is that boos 90% of the time will run in the direction opposite from you, so if they escape into the hallway, you can suck them towards where you don't want them to go to, and they'll start running in the opposite direction towards the room you want them in. Now at this point you might be saying, alright, I get it, Hyper, the game's sucky, but if there's nothing to challenge me or no variation, this is gonna get a bit boring. Well, fear not, because that's where portrait ghosts and bosses come in. What's cool about these guys is that they're more important because they were the ghosts EGAG had trapped in paintings, and what's funny about this is that before you enter the mansion properly, EGAG invites you to the gallery, but it's all just empty frames since all the ghosts escaped. Anyway, to start with the former, portrait ghosts can be seen as mini-bosses of sorts. They require slightly more thought about tackling them, and by that I mean you have to do a sort of mini-puzzle first to be able to suck them up. Usually it isn't super tough to figure out what to do to get a portrait ghost to reveal their heart, but if you do have trouble, you can scan their heart to get some hints. Even though it isn't super challenging to deal with portrait ghosts, they do a good job shaking things up a bit, and sometimes they do some more interesting stuff with them, like how with Mr. Lugs, you have to lure out the server ghosts and then suck them up to get Mr. Lugs angry at you when all of his food is gone, or with the toy soldiers, where you basically have to fight a 1v3. I also normally hate enemy rushes in games, but since Van Gogh created all the ghosts you've battled at this point, including the portrait ghosts, I think it makes sense for him to create a bunch of ghosts to fight for him. Portrait ghosts also have ranks, which you'll see once you get to the end of an area in the form of their portrait frames. From what I can recall, the portrait frames don't get you anything, but come on, you gotta go for that gold frame. You'll be able to get it if you get a ghost in one suction, you'll get a silver frame if it takes 2 or 3 sucks, and any more than that nets you a bronze. What's cool about these is that there's 3 different pieces of art representing them depending on what frame you get, and I like how they usually are more happy if you get the gold and more upset or depressed if you get bronze, because I mean, bronze is such a tacky color, who'd want to remain in that for the rest of their afterlife? On top of that, you'll be able to see them in the gallery afterward as well, which makes for a nice breakup once you finish an area and head back to the lab. Next there's bosses. There's only 4, but they're pretty good, or at least 3 of them are. Chauncey is a good opening boss. It's not super challenging, but it'll give you a good idea for what to expect later down the line. It starts out like how the portrait ghost encounters with the mom and dad went, but then you get shrunken down and have to deal with a lot more attacks than you did with the portrait ghost before this. Then there's Bogmire, who makes a very striking opening appearance, and then has a really fun boss afterward, where you can suck up his shadow clones and then launch the goop back at him to make him vulnerable. The third boss has an actually really well set up opening. You enter this door like it's just another normal room, but then your boo radar starts going insane and you see a circle of boos just waiting there for you. Unfortunately though, that's the best part, because you then have to fight Boolossus. This thing is really annoying. It starts out pretty simple. You gotta suck them up to move them around, and then you can pop them into the individual boos using the unicorn statues. Afterward, you freeze the boos with the ice element and suck up as many as possible before they reform. It's a good setup, but at the end of the fight, those little bastards start getting smart, and if you wave your ice around all willy-nilly, you aren't gonna hit shit. So you gotta bait out their attack to freeze them when they fly by, but even then it's still hard to get them like this, and there's still a high chance of you getting hit. Thankfully the game gets its act together with the final boss, but we'll save that for a bit later. Bosses give you gold frames differently from the other portrait ghosts. Since they're tougher, they're never gonna be sucked up in one go, and as such, you get the gold frame here by taking as little damage as possible, and as you can see by it being the only bronze frame I have, Boolossus kind of decimated me. Another reason you want to have as much suck in one go as possible for both portrait ghosts and bosses are pearls. Pearls are dropped by portrait ghosts and bosses while you suck them up, and the longer you hang on, the more pearls you get. Even better, if you suck them up in one go, you'll be rewarded with a big pearl, although this is made harder by the fact that when you get close to finishing off a portrait ghost, they drop a poison mushroom that'll interrupt your suck. The main reason you want to get these pearls is to contribute to the money you've collected. Yup, this is another pretty important part of the game, the money. For whatever reason, this mansion is absolutely loaded with stuff to make you 50 times richer than when you entered, whether it be gold coins, bars, dollar bills, or even straight up gems. You'll be able to find these mainly by searching through cabinets, fans, blankets, chests, houseplants, grandma's china cupboard, all filled to the brim with cold hard cash, so it's in your best interest to search around as much as possible. Despite all this money lying out in the open, there's also a good amount of hidden places or objects that give you stuff, like when you examine this hole and it brings you to this room filled with chests. One of my favorites is this plant here. You find it right at the end of Area 2, and you might not even notice it at first, but if you make sure to water it, it'll grow a bit. Afterward, you can water the plant again at the start of Area 3, and one last time at the start of Area 4, and you'll be given an ass load of money, plus the most valuable gem in the game, the gold diamond. It's this really cool side quest the game doesn't really tell you about, especially since you'll need to run to a room you've already cleared multiple times to do it successfully, and you're handsomely rewarded for being perceptive. In fact, now that I think about it, you're rewarded a lot for watering the plants, since they give you some really rare gems, which I find pretty funny, the disparity between how you get some of these gems. Take the Blood Diamond, for instance, obtained after you beat King Boo, your most powerful and most important adversary. You get the other one by watering some plants on the roof. Or how about the Gold Diamond? You get one after you clear out all the boos in the mansion, one of the most tricky tasks to do. The other Gold Diamond is obtained by watering this plant a bunch. I guess money does grow on trees. Although, if I'm being honest, I actually really appreciate that you can get the Gold Diamond without catching all the boos, because it allows you to contribute big to the money tally without having to go through all the trouble. The money is a cool side thing to do, but I'll save what the reward is for the end. After playing through this game again though, what's really made me appreciate it is all the little things. Luigi's Mansion is the definition of how a little goes a long way. One of the first I noticed was the humming Luigi does. It's of the main theme, but it's done in a way that makes it seem as if he's trying to calm himself down. And I also like how the humming and the instrumental mix to create a full song. The A button is used to examine items, but if you're not on top of something, you'll call for Mario, which isn't used for anything, but it's a nice detail how the lower health you're at, the more distressed Luigi will become when he's calling out.
Mario! 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 Mario? Mario! Mario!
Another thing they nail is the atmosphere. I really like the way you can see the dust from ghosts and objects in dark rooms, which was actually a pretty big thing for this game and was used to show off the graphical power of the GameCube. Speaking of which, I feel they do a great job when it comes to lighting, since rooms with ghosts are always dark enough to feel dangerous, but never dark enough to where you can't see what you're doing. To contrast this, lit-up rooms feel a lot safer and have this warm glow, which just makes it feel all the more rewarding when the further you get into the mansion, the more of the usually ghost-infested hallways become completely lightened and safe. What's even cooler is that later they flip this on its head completely. Right at the start of Area 4, before you can even check out the new rooms, lightning hits the mansion and there's a power outage, and now all of the rooms, even previously lit up ones, have more ghosts than ever before. And while it makes things more dangerous, it also lets brave players go into dark rooms and catch any speedy spirits and gold mice they might have missed for more money. It's this really cool moment, and Luigi's Mansion is filled with stuff like this. I mean, it's not perfect. You need to get a key from a portrait ghost to open up the generator room to get the electricity back. And the hint you get is that he likes rooms with mirrors. So I thought he was, you know, in the mirror room, but no, that was stupid of me. He's actually in the wardrobe room. Now, that's kinda dumb, but despite that hiccup, it's still a very good part and one of my favorite moments in the entire game. One of my favorite ways they create atmosphere is through the sound design. I already talked about Luigi's humming, but the music and sound effects do a really good job. I usually talk about music towards the end of the video, but it and the sound effects just have this haunted electric zap that I've still only heard be done in Luigi's Mansion. It's like someone composed the soundtrack and then ran a high voltage current through it, like damn! I like how the electricity and chaos becomes most apparent in boss fights, with one of my favorite examples being the stinger right before you fight Bogmire. Another thing I think they do well is characterizing the portrait ghosts. They could have just made them bigger and more difficult ghosts, but they went through the extra effort to put a bit of personality into each of them as well, which I greatly appreciate. What I find fun is that some of these guys are just minding their own business, and the reward for beating them is a chest full of money, so if you feel like it, you could just walk by and pay them no mind. The biggest step they made, though, is giving all the portrait ghosts individual entries to read through. I mean, they aren't full biographies, just a short sentence, but some of them are interesting enough for it to be a cool addition of the game. Everyone points out Sue Peas, the 7-year-old ghost who apparently died in her sleep, and yeah, hot damn, that's pretty rough for a funny Luigi game, even if it is only mentioned in a sentence, but personally I've always been more interested in Bogmire's, a product of the mansion's fear and despair. He's not sure who to fear or what to despair these days. It's not a ton, but it's enough to get the gears turning. If he's a product of the mansion's fear and despair, what was he fearful of originally? Why does he not resemble a human like all the other portrait ghosts, or even a Boo, instead just being this goopy thing? And why can he make these weird shadow clones? I know there's no answers, and it's a Mario game at the end of the day, and doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, but it's still interesting to think about. This game doesn't just characterize the portrait ghosts well, though. Luigi's Mansion is also pretty much entirely responsible for the personality Luigi has today. This is what established Luigi's persona. Now he's cowardly but determined, bumbling yet well-meaning. It's crazy what one game did for Luigi's character. I mean, think about it. Before this game, Luigi was strictly in the shadow of Mario, made because, hey, Mario games could use some multiplayer, but wouldn't you know it, the game where he became Player 1 made him stop being just Player 2. How poetic. It's not just his characterization either. The feature on the Game Boy Horror that lets you scan ghost hearts can be used to scan the environment as well, and Luigi will give his thoughts on them. And I know it's just a message that's been coded onto multiple objects, but it's still interesting that these are defined as Luigi's thoughts in an official Nintendo game. How he apparently has been wanting a doll's head for quite a bit, and how he's a bit of an art snob apparently. I'm not sure why I'm not surprised. One of my favorites is probably this one, where he scanned the graves right before Bogmire, and Luigi says, "I guess you just can't plan for this sort of thing." It's kinda dark, honestly, but that's what makes it cool and adds more personality. Oh yeah, I also forgot there's this part that happened to me in the Clockwork Room, where I scanned this soldier marionette and Luigi said, "How disturbing," with this question mark saying, "What is this?" over the object. And it kind of freaked me out, not gonna lie, mainly because I'd never seen that question mark pop up before, and it was hard to figure it out online since it didn't seem like a ton of people talked about this, but from what I can gather, this pops up whenever you scan an object a Boo can hide in. 20 years later, and I'm still finding new stuff in this game. Putting aside the darker stuff, there's still some funny scans to find. The one that got me is this sociopathic line. You scan this lion head and he says, "This is the kind of thing I'd put in the bathroom." I mean, I don't blame him. Got one in my bathroom, in fact, but King Boo is right there. Is this really the time to be talking about bathroom decor? Speaking of which, I think it's about time we wrap this up, so let's get to our endgame. Now, you can actually get to King Boo's door early, but if you do, he'll blow you away until you have enough Boos to fight him. I think 40 out of 50 is the requirement. Something that I always found a bit weird, though, is that you don't get the orange key the same way you get all the other colored keys. Instead of fighting a boss, you just beat Van Gogh in a pretty easy portrait ghost battle and get on your way. I mean, I guess it'd be a bit weird if you went from fighting a boss to having a mid-break to go back to the lab, and then go straight to fighting King Boo, so that's probably why they did it. I always thought the hallway leading up to King Boo was cool. Everything in the mansion is slightly warped, and that hits its peak once you get to the basement, and the final hall is this twisting, turning corridor that's shrouded in green. This isn't some insane analysis, I just think it looks neat. Then we get to the final room. I didn't talk about this, but you actually get here a lot earlier in the game, and all you can do is look through this lion head. So close, yet so far. My favorite part is the hanging ghost that pops out right after this, almost like the thing's taunting you about it. Initially, King Boo doesn't even look at you, he just monologues about how good it was to beat Mario, and how he isn't even afraid of Luigi, just the poltergeist. Until... So the final boss is in hell, apparently. But that isn't even the most pressing issue. Bowser decides to storm the party, and he's a hell of a lot bigger since Mario 64. He does the standard shtick, breathing fire, throwing spike balls, that is, until you throw one of the balls back at him, and bam, his entire damn head flies off, revealing it to just be a suit for King Boo. And then the head starts flying around, shooting ice balls at you while you try to suck up the king, and I won't lie, it was pretty creepy to me as a kid watching people play this game. Eventually, he even starts putting his head on the wrong way and starts running all over the place. It's pretty fucked up, but pretty cool nonetheless. This boss is really fun. It's leagues better than the Boolossus fight that came before it, and it's probably the best in the game, and also, coincidentally, the only time I died in this playthrough, so that's something. The music here is also really cool and foreboding, dare I say. Finally, after a bit of whittling away at him, you defeat King Boo and get that blood diamond. And defeating him feels really impactful with how the Bowser suit falls lifelessly, shaking the entire space. It makes me feel like I accomplished something. Afterward, you take the painting Mario was trapped in and run back to EGAD's lab. Turns out the machine you've been using to make ghosts into portraits can run in reverse, and you use it to get Mario out of the painting. This then brings my favorite scene in the game. Mario flies out with the vent on his head like a doof, and Luigi starts shedding tears of joy and laughing seeing his brother back, and it's honestly just a really touching moment that makes me happy every time I see it. Right before the game ends though, while the mansion might have been an illusion, the money you got wasn't, so EGAD uses it to build Luigi's new mansion, which, yeah, this is what the money you've been getting was for. The more you get, the better rank you'll have by the end, and the better mansion you'll see. Usually I average out at B rank, which is what I got for this playthrough, but I have gotten A a good number of times. The houses can actually get so shitty at lower ranks that the worst just has a tent built on the hill where the mansion was, which is pretty funny, but it's so hard getting that little money that it isn't even worth it. And yeah, that's Luigi's Mansion, and you know what? I think I finally get why I come back to this game so often. Well, you know, besides it being a generally good game. Luigi's Mansion has constantly captivated me with its simple yet enjoyable gameplay, as well as its great atmosphere and personality. Some people have lobbed arguments of this game of how the gameplay is too simple and the progression can be a bit too linear, and while those are valid, at the end of the day, I don't care because the game's just fun. In fact, I can kind of admire the simple gameplay since it makes the game feel like it knows what it is and sticks to giving the best experience of what it can do, instead of overreaching and becoming muddled and doing things it can't. I definitely recommend this game. If you're either just looking for an appropriately themed and pleasant time, or if you want to celebrate the season but are a little too faint of heart for the horror stuff, I think you should make your Halloween a little more fun by checking out Luigi's Mansion. If you have a GameCube, the game can be a little annoying to get your hands on. I swear it's a miracle I have a physical copy of this thing in this day and age. But hey, emulation is always an option that I promote, so that's always open to you if you either don't have a GameCube or make smarter spending decisions than I do. With that, I hope you enjoyed the video. Of course, have a happy Halloween, and I will see you all later. Take care.